Okay, I'm going out on this to take out Steve. So you're on, Jason.
Oh, wow. I'm on and we're taking out Steve. I wonder how much he's going to like that. You know what? How are you?
I'm back now. I took Steve out really fast this time. It doesn't always work that way.
Oh, funny.
Jason Scheff, I feel like you're my new friend, but like I feel like I've known you forever because we have all this history in common, right?
Yeah, I love that. That's what happens. We've all been, in this industry and in Los Angeles at different times, and it's one family. It's one big and getting smaller family. So I love that we've connected.
Okay, so I do too. I do too. And we are part of a family that we'll talk about in a little bit, but your family, you have iconic lineage. Can you tell everybody a little bit about your dad and where you come from?
Yes, my father, Jerry Scheff, is one of the greatest bass players that ever walked the planet. And he and my mother met when he was in the Navy down in San Diego in the early 60s. And they had me and my brother, Darren, and got married in 1962. And they lasted a few years, and he moved to Los Angeles, actually Palm Springs first, and we stayed in San Diego, my mother and what ended up being, I had another brother from a different father earlier, before me. Todd is 2 years older than me, and then Lauren is the youngest, and so there's four of us, and so we all were in San Diego. And really one family, and then Dad came up to Los Angeles and became really, I'd call him like the second string wrecking crew bass player. There was Carol Kay, Joe Osborne, and my dad worked a lot in those circles with all of the guys, Earl Palmer, playing Jim Gordon. I didn't really know the extent of his discography until later. I just knew that I went to see the Fifth Dimension. I think, well, it was 1968, so I was 6 years old. And they came to town and Dad was playing bass with them.
Wow.
I'll never forget meeting, I can't remember their names, but the big guy, and
I just remember McCoo,
Marilyn
McCoo. What was his name?
Billy Davis.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so those two. And then there was the big guy who I walked through the backstage area, and they put the backstage pass to get you in the backstage area at that time was a rubber stamp that was a $.
Wow.
There were no like laminates or pass or anything. So in order to like, okay, these guys are okay, they had a rubber stamp, stamped my hand, it was a $. I'll never forget the big guy in Fifth Dimension looked at me and said, "Do you know what that is?" And I'm like, "No." And he told me. And so it really just amazing how a memory will come back.
Did you appreciate, Jason, by the way, I just sent you the actual link for the show if you want to throw that up on your thing. Sure. Did you appreciate at the time who your father was, who these musicians were? Okay, so like, were you into music right from the get-go? Were you playing? Were you singing? When did that happen for you?
So at 6 years old, of course, not playing bass, but I was starting to, I think it was either right then or right after that I was plunking around on a friend's piano, my best friend up the street, Danny Pritchard, and his mother was a piano teacher, and he was learning things like Peer Gynt Suite, In the Hall of the Mountain King, right? And I learned it. So I was watching him play, and so I started learning that, picking it out.
So you learned it, you learned it by ear?
Yeah, I was watching him and just went and picked it out. And his mother called my mother and said, "Linda, you should get him some piano lessons because he's got some talent." So we got lessons, and I never practiced. I was
so you were like every other kid.
Yeah,
basically.
It was reading. So I was just playing by ear until all of a sudden I couldn't sight read. And she was on to me and said, she was really cool. can't remember her name. I'm pretty good with names too, but I remember her sitting me down and saying, you need to make a decision. And by the way, what you have is a very strong gift. So you're not going to say the wrong answer. But if you want to do what I'm doing, you got to practice this stuff, which was basically reading. And I wish I had taken to it, but my ear was just so in tune with that. And so
Wait, I have to stop you. Ronald Townsend, everyone's saying Ronald Townsend. So he was the big guy in the Fifth Dimension.
Ronald Townsend, yes.
Oh, okay.
Oh, love him.
Everybody's commenting. So
Love him. And I don't think he's around any longer. I wanted to reach out to, because I'll get to the other ones that I have reached out to, but at any rate.
Okay, so I didn't mean to interrupt. Okay, so yeah.
So I was sitting in the audience, and I knew my father was a musician, great, but all of a sudden I had met Ronald Townsend and the others. Actually, it was probably Marilyn and Billy, just a friendly hello. They were all very sweet. And so I saw these people as just, the people my dad was working with.
Right.
And we're sitting in the audience. And when they played, This Is the Age of Aquarius and Up, Up and Away, I flipped out and said, that's them.
Oh,
and
you
I got
hadn't
it.
put it together yet.
No.
Oh.
So I flipped out thinking
Mhm.
this is big time. My dad's a star. And
Nice.
a year later,
Mhm.
he came to take me and Darren up to Big Bear for Christmas. And when he picked us up, it was 1969. And I said, hey, how are my friends in the Fifth Dimension, And he said, well, I don't work with them any longer. And I was heartbroken thinking that, did he get fired or something? Because I have another job and I think it's probably going to be better. And I said, really, what is it? And he says, I'm playing with Elvis Presley. So
were you okay? Now, were you an Elvis fan?
No, neither was he, by the way.
Neither was I. Okay.
I know. Well, here's the cool thing. My dad, and he was married to a wonderful lady named Vivian. And the story goes, because they were hippies, right? They were cool. My dad was a jazz musician, an upright player that was transitioning to electric bass to do sessions in LA.
Right.
And he so he was just cool. He was cool. And so when Elvis came back after the military and did his comeback special, and he didn't know if anybody was going to like him, and his fans had stuck around.
Right.
But that black leather suit special just lit it up. And so they reached out to Elvis reached out to James Burton and said, put the best band that you can put together. So he started, assembling the group, and he called my dad and said, Jerry. So he'd done a lot of sessions with him and said, Jerry, I want you to come on audition. So dad goes into Vivian and says, James Burton called me and he wants me to come on audition for Elvis Presley. And Vivian's going, really? You're not going to go, are you? Or something like that. Maybe I'm
gonna go.
But that was the vibe. It's like, like, this is a joke. He goes, well, I'm going to go down and, and honor, that. And he said he walked in the room, and that man's, you've always heard this, but from my father, he said that man's presence was just unbelievable. There was no bullshit, trying to pose or posture. He didn't need to. He was just so real and so right there. And just, my dad said, I just really dug him personally from the moment I met him.
Wow.
And he said to him, Elvis, I don't really know a lot of your material.
Wow.
And
to the
how many stars would just be like, this guy's out of here? But here's what's so cool, because James had told him about him too.
Right.
He said, Elvis, I think he said, I don't really know any of your material. And Elvis said, well, what do you like to play, Jerry? And Dad said, I like to play the blues. And Elvis said, well, let's play some blues. They played some blues, done deal. He had a gig. He went home and he said he walked in, and Vivian, he looked at her and said, and Vivian's told me this story, and it's just great when she tells me. He said, you're not going to believe this, but I took the gig. She goes, what? And he goes, you'll see. You'll see. She said the same thing. She went down and the guy was just unbelievable. This is 1969. He was coming back in his prime in great shape, wasn't all off into all what happened to him.
Right.
And he was incredible. He was
Oh,
incredible.
wow.
So that's what my dad's part of the TCB band, which is just for any of you, for all you youngsters out there, go check out Elvis live Madison Square Garden and listen to that band. Listen to what my dad's doing at the end of Suspicious Minds.
Oh,
Like ridiculous, right? So then I got to say one more
wait,
thing.
what year is that?
Probably 72-ish or something like
Wow.
that. Any of like the, even up till the end, the band was just unbelievable. So I was with a buddy having dinner one night, and he was invited to be on Love Lines on K-Rock.
Yeah.
During the 90s. And he said, hey, you want to come up with me? And I'm going, sure. I wasn't invited to be a guest or anything. And I remembered the DJ, his name is Poor Man. And I had heard he was a huge Elvis fan. So I'm going, well, because this is K-Rock, edgy station. I'm in Chicago. I'm wondering if they're going to be going, what's this guy doing here? Everybody's worried about being cool, right? But that's what's so great about all of a sudden running into circles. The real world class are not caught up in that. It's like, it's just music, it's competence, and everybody, you're in the club, right? At a certain level. Right. So I walk in, my buddy Chad walks in, and then I walk in, and they're playing 25 or 6 to 4 on the radio. And I'm going, whoa. So they're actually showing respect. Oh, okay. And Poor Man says, and Dr. Drew was the resident psychologist for Love Lines on it. He wasn't Dr. Drew.
Right.
And so I walk in, and they said, Poor Man says, hey man, Jason, what have you been up to? And I'm going, wow, suddenly I'm a guest on this thing. I go, well, we just got back from Japan, and I said, but I don't want to talk about me. I want to, and they're like, thinking I was, egoing out or something. I said, I want to talk about my dad. And they're looking at me. I looked right at Poor Man and I said, my dad was Elvis Presley's bass player, and he lost his mind. And I said, but it gets better. Now, remember, there was a band, the other guest that was invited for that episode was a band called the Nymphs. And it was this girl and her boyfriend named Jet, and the guitar player. So the two of them were on the show, and they're sitting there as this is going down. And so I said, my dad was Elvis's bass player. And I said, but it gets better. And I said, my dad was the bass player on the Doors' LA Woman album. And this kid, Jet, on national, if not worldwide radio says, dude, what's it like having a dad who's cooler than you? I couldn't wait to tell my father that, and he loved it.
A dad cooler than you. I'm writing it down.
Yep.
Okay, so you had a dad cooler than you. Well, that's arguable now, but
I don't know.
That's the Doors and Elvis. I don't know. That's kind of hard to, yeah, that's kind of hard to.
It is. He wins. He wins.
I've
told him.
Oh
my God. He's so sweet, because he didn't sing. He didn't, he didn't become successful as a vocalist. So whenever I hear over the years, and he says it in front of people, he goes, Jason's better than me. I said, impossible, dude, man. That's never going to happen. You are the gold standard, and he is. So.
Wow. And did you, is your bass playing influenced by him, or are you completely your own person in that regard?
I'm my own person because.
Oh, wait, you're putting the bass down. We're going to have you do something before you put that bass down.
Okay, here,
do something, play something for us. Sing, and you have to sing with it.
Okay. Riders on the storm.
No, you have to.
Riders on the storm.
No, you have to do a Jason. You have to do Jason.
Into this house of born. So that's one that my dad played on, right?
That
So
is so crazy.
isn't that cool? I played that with Robbie Krieger at the Whiskey Sunday night. He was playing Sunday night and he said, man, will you come down? Because I always play Riders and I play LA Woman that my dad played on with
Oh,
Robbie Krieger
God.
at the
Oh,
Whiskey. They were the house band for the
oh, God.
Chicago was the house band too for a while. Hendrix came in, saw them at the Whiskey and took them on the road with him to open for them. The stories
Jesus.
I heard of the guys in Chicago on tour with Jimi Hendrix,
Oh my
that's
God.
Janis Joplin, all of them. It's incredible.
That's all right. Play something. We're going to talk so much more.
Okay, let's see.
You have to sing.
Waiting for the break of day. Searching for something to say. Flashing lights against the sky. Giving up, I close my eyes. Sitting cross-legged from 25 or 6 to 5. Yeah. There's one thing.
That's a pretty damn good thing. And was that your first recording? Was that your first hit with Chicago that you guys re-released?
You know, it's funny because we released that remake of 25 or 6 to 4 and it was so bizarre because the guys in the band were turning 40 years old when I joined in 1985.
And you were a little pisher. You were in your 20s, right?
23 years old.
Oh my God.
So by the time that came out, I was 24, but all the program directors were the band's age, right? They were like 40 years old.
Right.
And they came up with that. It was almost like a boycott because I'd heard that the phones were really good, you know, on the new song, but they were not happy about it at all. So they did not push it. So we said, all right, let's come with the ballad, Will You Still Love Me? And obviously got it out in time and it went to number 3. So
Wow.
25 or 6 to 4 was the first single, but it really didn't chart well. But Will You Still Love Me went almost to number 1.
Geez. All right. So before we get to how you got to Chicago, so all right, you're a 6-year-old kid.
Yep.
You're seeing your father with the fifth dimension. And by the way, that somebody came through with the other names of the people in the fifth dimension. Now, if I could only find the screen and I can tell you who they are, but I can't find it right now. Huh?
Florence was one of the females.
Yes.
I remember
Okay.
her last
Wait.
name. Marilyn, of course.
Oh God. Now hang on. Okay. Yes. Florence LaRue. Lamont McLemore.
That's right.
McLemore. Okay, there you go.
McLemore, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, tall guy, handsome guy. Right. And they okay, so let me finish that story real quick. So
Yeah.
we finished they finished the show and I'm just like
Yeah.
blown away that I see
my God.
now they're stars. And my grandmother was going to pick me up that night and she was late, which she never really was. And the next thing I know, my dad was like, hey man, you can just fly back up to LA with us and I'll just make sure you get home. So I'm in a taxi and Florence was sitting right next to me and she just had the most beautiful energy and smile. Yeah, come with us. And I was a little scared because I'd never been on a plane before. And next thing I know, I see my grandmother, you know, like frantically looking in every taxi and then finally finding me and rescuing me to get out because she never flew. That's a generation.
Wow.
She never flew. I was terrified of airplanes. So I'll never forget that I was almost going to fly up with them. And then the first year, so Will You Still Love Me was released at the end of 86. And so it was a hit in 87. So in 87, we did Solid Gold and Marilyn McCoo was the host.
Oh,
It was the coolest thing to walk up to her and say, I've got a little story for you. And she was just blown away.
Wow, that's so, all right. That's so cool. All right, so you're a little kid.
Yep.
You're in awe. You're seeing what's going on with your dad. You're obviously not playing bass yet. You're playing piano.
Mhm.
You're not reading music. You're just kind of playing
Playing
by
by
ear.
ear. Yeah.
But you did learn to read music, I assume.
You want to know something? I'm working on it now.
You know, that's so interesting. Snuffy
Now.
doesn't read music. So many incredible musicians don't read music. Well, that's interesting.
I know. Well, because if you have a gift in the other direction, it made music a lot easier.
How
than-
so?
than because it was natural.
Mm,
I was always able to pick stuff up real fast, right? That's from my
Mm.
father. I've seen him do it.
but your
And
father obviously was a gifted reader because
He
he was a
is.
session musician. So
you know, that's
right.
the thing. And that's the one thing I tell my kids or anybody up and coming. I say, here's the deal.
Mhm,
Especially if you're gifted,
mhm.
it's easy to take your foot off the gas pedal. But if you, and especially if you're like in a small percentage of whether it's a successful musician or somebody that's got so much of a gift that you don't have to work as hard as the next person at it.
Right.
If you apply just a tiny bit more discipline, then you really separate yourself from the pack, right? My kids are actually listening to me on that.
You know, they could take a lesson too from your friend, Mr. Ferrone, because when we
Yes.
went to see Summerfest just last week, he was on the charts the whole show because the click wasn't working, right? Something was going on.
Yeah, at the beginning. Yeah. Which, funny enough, he's played all this stuff enough times, but part of what happens is that I've got a track that cues, you know, what section's coming up, right? Because the band with Generation Radio, which we'll get to, that I have with Jay
Yes, we
DeMarcus
will.
of Rascal Flats, we play so infrequently that I put a system together so that, because I mean, listen, that's such a whole other conversation and debatable that we don't need to play to clicks and
Of
cues
course.
at all. But if you don't really get together that often, you're going to like spend 3 or 4 days in rehearsal to kind of, no, you're not going to be able to, you're not going to be able to take the offers because, you know, you're going to be
Mhm.
sitting and nobody's got the time to do it. So I put those together really as kind of training wheels. So when the training wheels came off, I was actually excited. I was really excited when I realized we're going to have to punt. And it's funny because Steve and the conductor looked at me like, you know, they were looking to me for leadership. They were like looking at me to see if I was going to be panicking. And I was starting to get excited because as I wrote them the next day, I said, that was one of the most fun times I've had in such a long time. Because when we had the punt, I was grinning like a Cheshire cat deep down inside because I knew how great it was going to be because of who I have on stage with me.
And it was
Right? It's
fantastic.
It's like, you know, you bring somebody like Snuffy Walden, you bring anybody into the mix, it's just on that level. You're not going to worry.
Mhm.
Right. So it was fun to watch, you know, Ferrone and he laughed and he's saying, you know, you made me work tonight. I had to read because normally, but
Right. I've
But
never
he-
seen him read before.
oh, he's just the best. That guy. I've been fortunate to play with the greatest drummers in the world, Danny Seraphin,
Mhm.
Chris Bowden for many years. And I just love the fact that at this point in my life, I get a steady diet of Steve Ferrone. Yeah.
Oh, yes, he's quite something. Quite the charm. We went out to dinner the other night with him and Julian. He's quite the storyteller too. He
Yes,
needs
he
a
is.
microphone in front.
So was
Yeah.
my dad. You know, we did a symphony date in Fort Worth earlier this month, and Ferrone was on it, and it was so neat for me to watch somebody like Steve Ferrone that everybody's always just fawning over, right, and just
Mhm.
flipping out over, and I got to watch him kind of doing that with my father, and my dad was just
Oh.
really praising him, and my dad, those types of personalities, they want to tell stories, so I love it. It's like it's my show, right? It's my name, you know, on the ticket and the marquee and everything, but I'm going, no, it's their show. as far as like, sitting around backstage and everything, I'm like, just take it away, Dad. And he did. They were just,
Oh, wow, that's so great. Okay, so now let's go back to Jason. So,
okay.
so I think I asked you, so are you influenced by your dad's playing? Are you completely your own thing?
I think they split up when I was about 3. And so I was not really around him. I didn't go seeking out what he was playing on. By the time he was with Elvis Presley, I was 8 years old. So I wasn't even playing yet. By the time I started playing, funny enough, Elton John's my biggest musical influence, period. So I'd have to say Dee Murray, his bass player, the original bass player was and probably is, if not the most influential bass player on me, which ironically is very Paul McCartney-ish. We'll get to that with Joey Molland and all that stuff you were talking about earlier. But Dee Murray, very spirited, lyrical, that's very Paul McCartney. I didn't realize that because I was not coming up on the Beatles. I was coming up on Elton John. And then I went through a Kiss phase, which is funny because they're my friends, right? They're all my buddies, and I just got caught up in how the fun thing about that. But I segued real fast from that to one holiday season, and I bought a bunch of albums. I had spread on the floor Mahavishnu Orchestra, which ironically I just met Narada Michael Walden, who was the drummer on the one album that I had.
I've been talking to him for years, trying to get him to do this show, and he finally sent me his email, but he hasn't taken a date yet.
I'm gonna reach out to him afterward because I just connected with him, and we're talking about doing some collaboration.
How fantastic!
Yeah,
he's amazing.
absolutely.
He's amazing.
I know. Oh, I know. So I was going off into fusion jazz, and so Mahavishnu Orchestra. I was playing with.
But okay, so you picked up so you chose bass. I mean, I'm assuming you chose bass because of your dad.
It was because it was the last instrument left, but it didn't hurt that my dad, it made me feel connected to him when frankly we didn't have a lot of contact. He was busy, he was off working, he was in LA, so it wasn't like weekends with dad or anything. So
did he encourage you? Or discourage you?
Never discourage me, and thankfully, and I know why, because he saw what I had and believed in me, and so he was always encouraged, just like I am with my kids. I would never tell them not to do. They're incredibly talented. So it's like Paul Stanley says, when somebody says, would you discourage your kid to play music? He goes, why would I do that? It worked for me. It's like you'd be a hypocrite. Don't do that. It's like, well, it's to take your shot, but at any rate, my mom, I had a band. She's a singer. That's how my dad and her connected. She had a band playing top 40 down in like light top 40 in San Diego. And I joined the band when I was 14. I had a bass for about 6 months, but it was just natural. So I joined her band. I joined the Musicians Union. I was 14.
Wow.
And it was making me start feeling connected to my father. I'd be playing, of course, overplaying. I still do. Coming from that place, jazz fusion, just a lot of playing. I have to always. That's what's great about playing with Ferrone, is it teaches you, relax, man, relax. And so I was in her band, and a couple of the guys in the band were way off into this new fusion movement. Chick Corea's Return to Forever, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Billy Cobham. So we'd be playing these gigs around San Diego on the military bases, and I'd hear these guys cranking this stuff on the way up. And so I went, like I said, from Kiss to Mahavishnu Orchestra, Romantic Warrior, Chick Corea, Return to Forever, Weather Report, Average White Band. So here I am.
Oh yeah, Ferrone.
I discovered Steve Ferrone back in whatever it was, 73, 74-ish, whatever.
Wow.
And that was the beginning of it. Earth, Wind and Fire. So I'm a funk R&B freak. That's why Snuffy. When I met I'd met him a couple of times, but I was auditioning for Shaka Khan and it was looking really good. They were really liking me. And I'll never forget him walking in the door and coming up to me and said, "Man, you're killing it. That's great." They went with somebody else, but it was a great experience. And
Wow. So you have known him a long time.
yeah, yep,
Wow.
yep, I really have.
And I saw you on stage with Radim, so you've gotten to.
Oh,
Oh.
yeah.
Did you know Allie Willis?
I'd met her a few times. Yeah.
She was a good friend. Loved
Oh,
Allie.
really?
Yeah.
Sorry to the
Yeah.
loss.
Ugh.
We're losing.
So okay, so you were doing all the funky stuff. You were okay, so take us through. You're making money as a musician, you're playing, and what's your trajectory? How are you getting where you're going?
So what happened was I joined my mom's band and I was a pro and I felt.
And you're a kid and
Yeah,
you're not even old enough to be in the clubs that you're.
No,
Yeah.
but I totally felt comfortable. I knew that's where I was supposed to be. All the older guys, that I was working with were always just super encouraging.
Are you
So
going
I
to
was-
school?
Yeah, I was still in school. So I was really kind of becoming known as this young, bass player guy.
Are you singing?
Nope. I mean, I'm
Not.
doing a little. My mom kept hammering on me saying, "You got to sing." But I'm a tenor, so I've always had a high voice. I wanted to sound like a dude and be, tough sounding. So I'd try and
Boy,
sing.
did that work out well for you,
That's
Jason,
funny.
though.
So I'd always, if I'd try and sing what I wanted to sound like, there was no support, so I didn't think I had a voice. And my mom just kept hammering on me. So I was in her band. Then when I turned 15, that wasn't cool anymore. So I left and I was in some rock bands that were really fun. One called Cocoa Blue that was a really great band down in San Diego. And we used to play parties, and the guys that would be in the other bands that we'd be playing were bands like a group called Mickey Rat that turned into Rat, those guys. So we were
Wow.
running with all those guys down in San Diego. And then I got so this whole other fusion funk side of me, a guy named Sam Barris, great friend of mine in San Diego, called me one day and said, "Jason, I'm going to put the tightest," his words were, "I'm going to put the tightest, funkiest rhythm section in San Diego together. Would you like to play in the band?" And I said, "Absolutely." And he says, "Well, we got a gig. We're going to Seattle." And which meant I'm in school and oh yeah, it was in my 11th grade year. And I had missed so much school the year before because I was playing so much music and ditching school that I had 10th and 11th grade history, 10th and 11th grade
Oh,
English.
Jesus.
So I was so far behind that I said, "I'm taking the gig." And my mother had moved up to LA. So I was living with my grandmother at the time. And I told her, "I'm taking this gig." And she says, "No, you're not." And I said, "Yes, I am." And I called my mom. I think she might have slightly tried to be resistant. I'm saying, "You're in LA. What are you talking? I'm not even living with you." Called my father and I said, "Hey, Dad, I got a gig and I'm gonna quit school." And he said, "Absolutely." He said, "I did the same thing." He goes, "I did the same thing and then went back and got my diploma and it's never meant anything to me. I've heard you. I've heard what you do, so go for it." So that's Vicki was basically giving me
Wow.
the encouragement and the green light. So I
Wow.
took the gig, went up to this great little club with the Barris Brothers was our band, and we had the best holiday, like about a month up there, and then came back New Year's Day. We did, New Year's Eve, and then the best band in San Diego was called the People Movers, and it was a band leader named John Ozen that my mother used to go and hang out with in the late 50s at a place called the Mexican Village in Coronado. John played a piano bar. My mom would go in and sing with him. So they'd remain friends. And my mom used to parade me around when I was 14 and 15 and have me sit in with her friends, and they'd be like, "Oh, come on, Linda." And then I'd play and they go, "Hey, all right. You want to play a little more, right?" So it was that thing. It was like really encouraging, becoming like this little, I hate to use the word phenom, but you know, that's what it was, this little monkey that she was carting around the grinder organ. And it was awesome. It was so encouraging. It showed me that I could do it. You know, I was not struggling with, because the songs weren't that hard too, right? And so I went in and sat in with John Ozen when I was 15, and his bass player was Nathan East. Check this out. So Nathan, 1978, he's going to UCSD, studying bass and playing in John Ozen's band. And all of a sudden, Nathan started going to LA to become Nathan East. And he was doing Barry White sessions during the day and driving back to San Diego at night to make his gig, driving back to LA to resume his sessions the next day. I remember going to Nathan's going away party in 1978. And he was really sweet to me. I think maybe I'd sat in, you know, and he was just the nicest guy and still is. He and Ferrone play an awful lot together. And so I was at his going away party and just thinking, man, this is like the coolest thing. I'm really hanging out with the elite in San Diego. So I go and do this gig in Seattle, and on the way back, I'm going to live with my mom in LA, you know, because she's living there. And we stop at her house and she goes, keep going to San Diego. She goes, John called me, and the bass player he hired to replace Nathan isn't working out. The guy was like a real simple country, as he said, he's a country bass player. Boom, 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 boom. So and we were playing a lot of like pretty hip, you know, challenging music. You know, John Ozen always picked great songs to play. Funk, bordering on fusion, but a lot of top 40, but you know, which was great disco at the time and just challenging stuff. So she said, he wants you to come down there. So I went down to San Diego, and he heard me play, so he didn't need to. He said, do you sing? I said, no. And he goes, and check this out, Vicki, this is the turning point. And Nathan and I always laugh about this when I talk to him. He said, well, you have to sing in this band because Nathan sang. I go, okay. I mean, I wanted a gig, right? So he said, well, what do you want to try? And I'm looking at his set list, and I love passing this on to up and comers too. I did something and didn't realize what I was doing, but it was really beneficial. And it's been me for the rest of my life. I didn't know to be safe. I didn't. Well, first of all, I'm thinking this isn't even serious or real anyway. I'm going to try and get through something so I can get this gig, but it's certainly not to become a singer, right? So he goes, what do you want to try? And I'm looking at his set list and I go,
so it was not your aspiration. You were very content to be a bass player. Absolutely. That was your thing.
Because it was easy. I didn't have to work at it to play those types of gigs, right? Came very naturally, like I said. So the singing thing wasn't. Another thing I try and tell kids and up and comers, don't just rely on what comes naturally and easy to you. Put a little effort in, and you're gonna, you know, separate yourself from the herd. And I've got my mom's, you know, echo, you know, sing. I'm going, no. So he says, you know, what do you want to try? And I'm looking at the set list. And like I said, I didn't know to be careful because I picked probably one of the hardest songs you could. I said, well, how about Just the Way You Are? Don't go changing and try and please me. You never let me down before. I mean, the rangiest, right? I know I didn't blow his mind by anything great, but he spotted potential. So he made me sweat it out. Nathan told me he did the same thing to him. I'll call you tomorrow. And then offered me the gig. And I went in, and the singer was a woman named Moki Graham. Phenomenal. A superstar in San Diego. Just a great singer. So there was my first experience of walking up into basically an iconic situation with a legend, and I'm super outclassed, but she was really sweet and nurturing, right? So, and then I'd get questions. People would come in and go,
you're still really young. How old are you?
I'm 16.
Oh my God.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm getting people coming in saying, Nathan East, man, those are big shoes to fill. How does that feel? And I'm like, Well, I mean, I know I can't compete with them, but I mean, I didn't know this at the time to tell them, but I'm young and stupid enough to figure why not try, right? And but ask those questions, right? Nathan East, those are big shoes to fill. How do you feel about that? So by the time, and we'll get to how it all happened, but by the time I joined Chicago and I'm doing press, they were asking me, Peter Cetera, those are big shoes to fill. How's that feel? And I said, well, it's pretty intense, but I've been kind of groomed by this because Nathan East, I had to replace him and they asked the same question. So I guess that's my lot in life, to follow these icons. So anyway, that was the beginning of the singing. And so I was in top 40 bands and I'd sing a song or
So
two.
wait, did you then start, did you study after that? Did you start to sing every day? What did you
I was
do?
just doing whatever I needed to do to get by. I mean, I wasn't taking it seriously. I knew I had high notes, but again, I wasn't really able to sing the songs I'd really want to sing as a male vocalist. And so I remember John found a vocal coach for me. Howard Freed was his name. And I took a lesson or two, but really didn't apply it. But I just went there because John says, we need to get your vocal lessons. And I remember he'd say, no, 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 right? And so I don't remember much else other than that. So I'm just kind of going about doing the best I can. My mother is constantly pounding on me. You got to sing more. My friend Aaron Zigman, that I grew up in San Diego with, got a publishing deal with Almo Irving Records. He moved to LA right around when I did. I think he was 19. He was going to UCLA and was not going to school for music. But he loved music and he was really working. He was one of the hardest workers I'd ever seen. And he got this deal with Almo Irving, who started connecting him with everybody. Steve Cropper, Alan Gorey of the Average White Band, Jeffrey Osborne, Bobby Caldwell. So Aaron was bringing me into all these situations. We started co-writing with all these people. And I really hit my stride with Bobby Caldwell. And we started singing together. So I'm in the studio, and David Lastly, who I don't know if you know, he was James Taylor's, one of his main background singers, the guy with the long blonde stringy hair. Sounded like a Motown female. He was phenomenal. He just passed this year, and it's really sad. But David brought me into his world because he was an Almo artist or published writer, but also an artist. He made a record. Don Was produced it before Don Was. He but he hadn't really broken out as a producer yet. And we had a great time making that record. And I was singing background vocals with Marcy Levy, Charlotte Crossley, Arnold McCuller, David Lastly, and really hearing, and I've talked to all these people over the years, Bill Champlin, the same thing. When you sing next to people like that, and Bobby Caldwell, and you can hear, basically it's a love, because they are wrapping their voice around you and you are to them, which becomes that thing. So it's not about being a lead vocalist or an artist or anything. It is literally a joining of a sound as a background vocalist. And Bill Champlin's won Grammys as MVP background vocalist and arranger. Yet he's one of the most incredible lead vocalists and has sung some of the biggest hits in the world too. That was where I started really hearing what I could do vocally. Live, still not. I always struggled if I can't hear. To this day, if it's really hard for me to hear, man, I'm all over the place. You know, it's got to sound great, and it doesn't all the time. I've gotten a lot better at it, you know, but it's never something that I felt as comfortable putting a bass in my hand and walking in and just really having ice water run through my veins. But I started developing that way, and I started singing my demos with Aaron, and we started getting noticed. And Carol Childs of Geffen gave us some money to go in the studio to try and get us signed. And we kind of pissed it away. We weren't quite ready. And
well, Well, you're still a kid.
Yes, indeed, and doing very kid things and with the money. Wasn't a ton of
Okay.
money, but enough money to get into trouble too and waste the opportunity, but it wasn't supposed to happen then. So I end up going on my own and I'm writing songs with Dennis McCoskey, who wrote Maniac and ended up having a lot of success in Nashville and country. Me and Bobby and Dennis really hit our stride. Bobby and I started, you probably know Tony Bronigal.
I do know
Of course
Tony.
you do. Okay, so check this out.
Mm.
Then just tell me if I'm talking too much. Say shut up.
No, 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 no. That's what we're here for. We're here to
Okay.
hear you talk
So Tony,
and sing.
well, okay. So
Okay.
Tony and all these people, Snuffy, Tony, Terry Wilson, yeah, and Teresa, we're all in this world. And there's Willie Ornelas, who's in a duplex that Tony's living in one of the units. Tony's playing with Bonnie Raitt, and he says, I'm going on the road. You want to come and house sit for me? I said, sure. So I'm in Tony's house, and I just met Caldwell. And, you know, he knew me as a bass player. And I think we maybe had co-written something with Aaron, but I was so intimidated, I didn't really do much. And I was at Tony's house, and I was thinking, I got to get Bobby's attention. Let me try and come up with something. Let me try and write something that would get his attention. So I sat down at Tony's upright piano, and he still got it. I always tell him, if you ever want to sell that thing, I want to buy it, man. He'll never sell it. And so I sat down and I came up with these changes and a melody that I really liked. And I thought, what would Bobby sing? Let's see.
Jason, make sure we can hear your bass. They were saying, I noticed on the notes, people were saying they couldn't hear your bass.
It's going to probably be hard because it's acoustic. So
Yeah, we're not hearing the bass, but that's all right. We're hearing
So-
you.
well, then let's see. So so someday I may find true love that will last forever and ever. Till then, I'll spend a lifetime wishing us together. So that is a song that I started, took to Bobby, and we sat down. He was living at the Holiday Inn in Burbank, right off the 5 freeway. He had just come back to LA, having gone home to Miami after his big hit, What You Won't Do for Love, and a couple of records that didn't happen. He went back to Miami to regroup, and it was back in LA for a second run that ended up being great for him. And I was part of that beginning of when we were all sitting around writing and in the studio. And I was learning how to sing next to him, hearing his phrasing and just, you know, going off of that and his tone. And so we were sitting watching TV, and I said, man, I started this idea. You probably don't want to hear anything right now because we're relaxing. But what I love about us, our breed, is the muse always wins. We turn the TV off immediately. I said, let's hear it. So I barely squeaked out that melody I just sang to you. He flipped out and said, what is that? Pushed me off the bench and proceeded to go right into the key change and played basically the chorus, lyrics and all, of a song that ended up called Heart of Mine.
Wow.
And we knew we had a racehorse, but I was so stupid back then that couldn't finish it. That thing sat around for another year and a half. Dennis got involved, wrote the great transition chords into the chorus. And I went in to talk to Ronnie Vance, great publisher, Kathleen Carey and Ronnie Vance. It was Kathleen's company, and Ronnie was working with her, called Unicity. And I was over at Dennis McCoskey's. And Ronnie called and said, what are you doing, Dennis? And he goes, I'm working with Jason Scheff. And Ronnie had heard of me, and he goes, put him on the phone. So I said, he goes, what are you doing? And I said, we're just writing. said, I got my first covers. I got a song on David Lansley's record, and Carly Simon cut our song. And he goes, well, who's got the publishing? And I said, well, Henry, Bobby's manager is going to take care of it. And he goes, come on and take a meeting with me. So I went in and he said, he goes, so tell me what's happening. I told him, and he goes, Jason, stop giving your songs away. He goes, here's the way it works. If you have something in the pipeline, I can go into Kathleen and tell her, like, we got this kid and there's something coming, so she can offer you a deal. So he goes, why do you want a publishing deal? And I said, I want a publishing deal so I can go in the studio anytime I want without having to rely on my friends. Because back then, in 85, the gear wasn't there yet. If you wanted to record, you had to go into a studio, and it was expensive.
Right, of course.
Right? A year later, 2 years later, all the little 4-track cassettes were really getting popular. But in order to record for real on inch tape and everything.
Yeah.
So he says, what? I said, I want to go in and be able to basically not answer to anybody. He looked at me and goes, you want to go in and record? He goes, tell you what, I'll give you a couple days at MCA Whitney, no strings attached. I won't even take the publishing. You go record. And I said, great. And so I walked out of there, not realizing that he's testing me. Right? I was just thinking, well, he's just being a nice guy. So of course I wasn't taking it seriously. And I was smoking way too much dope back then, So let's just cut to the chase, because I think we're gonna get into that in a second here, because we're talking about that. But me and Bobby smoked tons of weed. Now,
my drug of choice, by the way.
Me too.
Okay.
If I was able to still handle it, I'd be doing it. But
me too.
But
and it really pisses me off that I never got to go into a pot store and I didn't get to have edibles, and it really pisses me off.
I know it's, we'll get into this in a while, because I'm so glad it's legal. I am so glad that it's legal.
I never would have left my house, Jason. I never would.
Well, me either. I'm just glad it's legal now, so that people, you're gonna find out if you have a problem or not anyway. But to remove the whole neuroses of I'm doing something wrong. Hey, a lot of people's lives were really.
Yeah, but it's so strong now.
I know it is. Well, let's get into that in a second. But for me, and for anybody who may be leaving this podcast soon, I'll just state I'm 36 years old. I'm 36 years clean and sober. So believe me,
21 for me.
I love it. It's been a long time since I've done any of that stuff. I really don't have any desire to, because I know where it leads for me. We'll get into that. But I'm just glad that it's not a criminal thing anymore.
Yeah,
for me personally.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so
I still get nervous every time I see a cop car in the.
Oh, I do too.
I still think, okay, do I have any pot in the car? I still think that.
What's the ashtray look like? I know. So yeah. So when I went over to Bobby with Heart of Mine, that's what we smoked the biggest joint that I brought, because that was my entrance in. I was the weed guy. I won his heart by that. And so we were really, really stoned, and the TV was on. That's when I just barely squeaked. I have this idea that I started. You probably don't want to hear it, And it was just this magical moment that he and I shifted gears in our relationship and became collaborators on a deep, deep level. So I'm sitting there with this opportunity to go in and record a couple of days at MCA Whitney. And it's so funny how impressionable you can be. I was talking to a friend, and I wasn't preparing, nothing, nothing at all. I was not preparing, just doing what I was normally doing, just goofing around.
That's the pot. I'm going to say that's the pot.
I totally agree, because I was every day from the minute I woke up. So of course I'm focused or disciplined. And I was talking to a friend saying, yeah, I'm going to go into, Ronnie Vance gave me a couple of days of studio time at MCA Whitney. So I'm going to go in and record. And I remember them saying, oh yeah, that old gospel studio. And in my mind, I thought that old gospel studio, meaning it's probably not really great. And I remember MCA had a little demo studio down in the bottom of the record label. And so I wasn't thinking that it was going to be, you know, much. The night before I went in to the studio, Aaron loaned me his DX7, and he had this little drum machine that was not great. And I programmed do that, do that, do that, just that. And I fire up the keyboard and I'm trying to write something. And whether it was good or not, it might have been, you know, there might have been something that was okay about it, but my brain was just, this sucks. You got nothing. So I just turned it off, drove to the studio the next day thinking I'm just going to walk into some kind of rundown. And I walk in and it's Neve Studer. So for anybody who knows what that is, Neve is the 70s iconic console. Like if you've seen Sound City, the movie, that was the console, the first one that came to LA that Keith Olsen had put in Sound City, did the Buckingham Nicks album on first, which had my father playing bass on.
Wow.
And that Neve console is a standard rock phenomenal console. And Studer tape machine, the standard at the time, right? That got my attention. I went, whoa, this is real. You better come up with something. So I said, what do I have? Not that piece of shit I was trying to work on last night. I don't even remember it anyway. I said, Heart of Mine. Let me. So I cut it. I cut this little crude version, and we only had one verse written. So second verse, same as the first, right? I recorded it, and I didn't know exactly. I didn't know what the protocol was. So I called Bobby, and I said, I hope you're not mad at me, but I went in and I cut Heart of Mine today. And he said, really? You like it? And I said, well, yeah. And he goes, come over here. I played it for him and he went, this is incredible. Wow. We're going to finish the lyric tonight and we're going to go in tomorrow and I'm going to produce your vocal and we're going to do background vocals together. And I said, awesome. So we get on the phone with Dennis McCoskey. We finish the lyric. I go in the next day, I cut it. I take a meeting with Kathleen and Ronnie. And Kathleen was magical, still is. She's like one of the greatest publishers and people in the world. And she was running this company. And Ronnie, she introduces me. And Ronnie asks me, so did you get anything? Kind of with like I know you didn't, you know, and I said, yeah. And he's like, really? He goes, do you like it? And I said, yeah. I wasn't like, you know, yes, why do you hear this? I said, yeah. And he goes, give me. He puts a tape in the tape player. And it was that moment. And I love talking to people when this has happened for them to find out when the moment was for them. And they played Heart of Mine, my demo. And I watched Kathleen close her eyes and take music in more deeply than I'd ever seen a human being listening to music. And Ronnie was just sitting there, you know, listening. And she had this smile on her face. And by the end of the song, she opened her eyes and looked over at Ronnie and said, we've got to sign him right now. And Ronnie goes, what? Really? I mean, don't you want to go on your vacation? She was going to go on vacation. She goes, no. Jason, get a lawyer. We're signing him right now. And she signed me. And one of the main reasons I wanted a publishing deal is I wanted somebody to talk about me like they were doing with Aaron. You know, they were getting Aaron, which meant Aaron and me to everybody. So sure enough, 3 months later, this is 1985, September. The Night Stalker was out. I remember Richard Ramirez. It was September of 85 and LA was panicking because the Night Stalker was still at large. Never forget that. It was super hot. Remember, that's why people were leaving their windows open.
I was in New York, so it's a whole different reality.
Yeah. Okay. So that was going on. And so I was writing.
I thought you were
songs.
talking about a television show when you first
No,
started talking. The
no,
Night
I
Stalker.
remember.
Okay. Oh,
I-
this was a
Richard
real Night
Ramirez.
Stalker.
Yeah,
Okay.
in LA, right when all this was happening. And so 3 months later, I get a phone call from Kathleen saying, something's going on. I don't know what it is, but I've been in this business a long time and I can feel it. Something's going on. Get ready. I go, for what? And she goes, and she says, I don't know, but something's happening. She said, Michael Austin called me yesterday, Warner Brothers, and says, do you have any songs for Peter Cetera's solo album? And or someone to write with him? Because Cetera had left Chicago earlier that year. And ironically, I was playing with Carmen Grillo, who I don't know if you know,
I
but
know
he's
the
all
name.
he's kind of part of that whole circle. He was another one of the background vocalists on the David Lastly sessions. Bill Champlin was hanging out. He was in Chicago already
Right.
because they had made Chicago 16 and 17. Chicago had made this massive comeback. They're all over the radio. And Bill Champlin, I remember him walking into rehearsal for Carmen one day because we were playing at my place at Snuffy, and all these guys used to play, Michael Ruff,
Mhm.
Bobby Caldwell, all of us. And Champlin walks in, I'll never forget, and he says, Cetera just left the band, right? And I'm just shocked because I loved what I was hearing, the David Foster era. And Tamara, Bill's wife, came up to me because she heard my voice on a movie session a week earlier. She came in after me and I'd done some vocals. So she heard me. She walked up to me and said, hey, Jason, you ought to get a tape to Bill. You never know. And I said, again, a kid who would never follow through because it's just too lofty. There's no way it's going to happen. I said, yeah, I should. Never did. And so that was early in the year. And then all of a sudden, so Bill and I'd become friends, and he just knew me as a bass player. I'm not going to open my mouth in front of this guy. He's a real singer. So we're just playing around a little bit here and there, and so this thing is happening. Michael Austin calls, says, do you have anybody to write either songs or someone to write with Peter for his solo record? Because they had both. When Peter went solo, Warner Brothers had both Chicago and Peter Cetera. Now they're of course looking for someone to replace Peter. And the word on the street, I remembered hearing it, Mr. Richard Page they were talking to him. And so all kinds of, stories went out that he was offered the gig. They were paying him a fortune. All this stuff was on the street. And then, you hear, no, he turned.
Who's filling in? I mean, because Chicago does so many dates a year. Who's doing it in the interim?
They had a gap. They had a small gap because they never stopped touring, but I guess
they never stopped touring.
Yeah, 1985, 85. I guess that summer would have been, they didn't tour that summer, but they toured early in the year.
Mhm.
That's when Peter had left earlier in the year. So technically they toured in 85. So they never missed a year, but they just didn't do a summer tour. So they weren't able to capitalize on the success of those records, because they were just on fire.
Right.
So they're trying to figure out, they need to get in and start Chicago 18, the next album. They were talking to Richard Page. He had a great record in the can with Broken Wings and Kyrie. So he's not going to leave that. They're just ready to come out. They were talking to Mickey Thomas, who's become a great friend of mine. Same thing. He was sitting on a record with Sarah and We Built the City. He's not going to leave. So they're talking to those guys. So they were getting to the point where they were just thinking, let's just get a singer. At first, Richard Page was interesting because he played bass, but they were starting to talk to just singers like Mickey. So my tape goes over to Warner Brothers.
So you do get a tape. You don't get the tape out. They get it out for you.
Yes, Michael Austin called Kathleen and said, do you have anybody for Peter's solo album, either songs or someone to write with him? She goes, yeah, we just
the tape went there, not to Chicago. It goes
No.
there. Okay.
Yet.
Okay.
So she said that, you know, he called and asked, and she said, yeah, well, we just signed this new kid. Let me send you his stuff. Sent the tape. I was not trying to sound like Chicago. I was not, you know, just doing my thing. I was trying to sound like Bobby Caldwell, to tell you the truth. And so she sends the tape, gets a phone call the next day from Michael's assistant. And the assistant says, who's singing on the demo? And that's when she says, the writer is Jason. And the assistant says, thank you, and hangs the phone up. That's when Kathleen called me and said, something's going on. I'm telling you. Had no idea what was in the works, but she said, get ready because something's happening. What? She goes, I don't know, but just be prepared. What happened is that when Michael heard the tape, he said, wait a minute, man, this sounds like what we need for Chicago. Forget Peter's record. He calls Lenny Waronker upstairs, says, come down here, you got to hear this. And Lenny comes down and goes, yeah. The tape goes to Howard Kaufman, who was managing the band at the time. The band, David Foster, all of Warner Brother, Mo Austin, and the entire staff. A week later, everybody's heard this tape, and I get a phone call saying, we think that you're the new lead vocalist of Chicago. And I'm going, well, maybe I should probably work on this marijuana cocaine problem that I have. No, I'll tell you what, Vicki, and I love going back down memory lane, and when we talk about this, the only reason I felt comfortable even continuing is I thought there's no way this is going to work. So I didn't really have, and they were so supportive. They made it so known. We want you, man. You're our guy. You're the future of the franchise. They made no bones about it.
Wow.
And as Howard Kaufman told me, because when I went in to meet him, he said, come in and meet me. So I guess he just wanted to make sure I didn't have 3 heads, you know, or that I was a real asshole or something. But because he told me on the phone, when we first talked, he said, how old are you? I said, I'm 23. And he goes, uh-oh. What? And he goes, can't you say you're older? He goes, can't you say you're 30? And I said, I'll say I'm 80 if that's what you mean. No, don't worry about it. But they were worried about creating a monster, right?
Mm.
And so I went in to meet him, and it was really, really great. And he looked at me and said, it's between you and Mickey Thomas. And he saw probably my head, you know, go down. And this is another thing I love to help up and comers with when I know that they've got the goods. He looked at me and says, Jason. And I looked up at him. He says, they want it to work with you. So he's basically saying it's your game to lose.
Ooh.
And that gets into, I was just talking about this to some really heavy duty television guys at a golf tournament that we were at a week ago. That moment when, and I was still really not in good shape with drugs, right? You know, I was handling it to pull the job off, but I was still using. The moment comes when you're in the batter's box and it's all on the line and you're either going to feel comfortable or not. And that's what it came down to. It's like, so I'm sitting there thinking, this is probably it's going to catch up to me at some point. I'll crash and burn at some point because I'm really not, I'm outclassed here, but every step of the way it was working. So I went and auditioned and
what did you do for your audition? Do you remember?
They had me do 3 songs. I know it was 25 or 6 to 4, maybe You're the Inspiration and one other song. And we blasted through them. It was at Danny Seraphin's home studio, so I couldn't really hear that well. So I know I wasn't blowing their mind vocally, you know. I was showing that, you know, I was getting through it and competent, but there's no way that the system wasn't set up to really sound really amazing. Plus I was just not ready, you know, on a certain level. And they so
you were 23.
Yeah, but still this is an important thing for them. So, and they could have whoever they wanted. So it was a pretty neat thing because we finished the first 3 songs and
Jason, how much did you want it?
I wanted it badly because they wanted me.
Yeah.
It was like this whole destiny thing was starting to unfold. It wasn't like this was my favorite band in the world and I couldn't wait to be in it.
Mhm.
It was just, and I got it why they wanted me. My voice was a tone that was perfect to go into
Yes.
that thing, right?
Mhm.
I was
Yes.
not quote unquote trying to copy Peter Cetera, but I'm a top 40 musician. And I always love this conversation too, that, you know, when people say, oh, at first, like, oh, he's a Peter Cetera clone. Well, first of all, there's never going to be a clone because he's the gold standard, just like my father. Never, the minute you're getting into that, you're cooked. But what I did do is I honored the music because I've heard it so much on the radio. It's just like the same thing when I started getting top 40 gigs as a kid. I heard it so much. I already knew how to play it without having played it yet because Chicago's a bit more challenging than a lot of regular top 40, but still my ear could go to that. So actually after the third song, they were saying, it was either Panko or Lamm that said, wow, man, that's great. I wish we would have had you learn more material. And I said, well, what do you want to play? And they go, did you learn anything? I said, no, but I've heard your stuff forever, man. They're going, you didn't work on anything? I said, no, but let's play something. They go, well, what do you want to play? And I said, how about Just You and Me? Which was one of the first songs that I really got turned on by at the beginning for me in 1972 or whatever it was. I was 10 years old. And they go, did you learn it? And I said, no, but let's play it. And they saw what I do. You know, I played it. And I even sang the sax solo, and Walt was really getting a kick out of it because I knew it so well, right?
Uh-huh.
I think that really helped that they saw they saw fearlessness, they saw a musical ability, as well as they were hearing, you know, and it's funny because after I did that, I can't remember which one of them said, okay, I'm sold. And I'm like going, oh shit, is this happening? And then Danny, to his credit, he was right. He said, guys, this is a big decision, man. I mean, he's obviously nervous. Maybe should we have another rehearsal in a real production facility and I got no problem with any of that. And Panko said, and this is so sweet. This just showed how much they believed in me. Panko said, well, I've heard his recordings, which to me now as a band member and a band leader, that doesn't mean anything. If somebody can't pull it off live,
Right.
really hadn't proven that yet. And like I told you, that was always an area, especially then when I'm not even really looking at myself as somebody on that level, that I didn't know if I was really able to. And I'm standing next to Bill Champlin and Robert Lamm, iconic voices, and replacing Peter Cetera. Who's the balls to do that, especially when you're this snot-nosed kid who's just, got a drug problem. But they're continuing to move forward. And so I'm going, well, I'm not going to torpedo it, and I'm just going to keep going until I crash and burn, and really expecting that to happen, to tell you the truth. So then all of a sudden they go, and Danny said, guys, this is a big decision for us. And they go, it was the best. They go, hey man, I hate to ask you this, but can you step out into the driveway while we talk? So I'm standing out there. Actually, Chris Pinnock, who was playing guitar for them, who had just left, he went out into the driveway with me. And I remember looking at him, trying to get like some kind of a read, and he wasn't giving me anything. And I walked back in and they said, hey, listen, you did really well. We have to honor Mickey Thomas an audition. We don't really think he wants to, but we at least have to honor that if he does, to come and audition. I said, no problem. They said, so we'll call you and we'll either, figure this out or maybe do another audition in a big production facility. And I said, great. So I left with a comfort of them saying you did real well, and I knew that they wanted it.
What was your gut, Jason?
My gut, well, that's a great question. My gut was this.
The truth.
My gut was that they were going to talk to Mickey Micky was going to be their lead singer, and I was just going, just let me be the bass player. That'd be real comfortable for me, you know. I did not think it was unimaginable that they would be calling me and saying, you're our lead vocalist now. I mean, it's just unfathomable.
Really?
Yeah, definitely. And then we went in and did another audition.
Was it disappointing for a moment when they said, okay, we're gonna
No, because
no.
because I didn't feel like I went in and I felt I killed it as a bass player. Like I said, that was easy.
Mhm.
I knew I had their attention as a bass player. They mentioned it. Wow, man, your bass playing is incredible. I said, thank you. My dad's Jerry Scheff. Yeah. So I was like, the whole time, Vicki, I'm going, this is really not going to happen. I mean, I'm going to play this out as long as it goes, right? And so we came back into a big production facility, went and did the same thing. Of course, I was nervous, and I know that I'm not blowing their minds vocally, but it was adequate. It was serviceable, obviously. And Robert comes up to me at the end of the rehearsal, or at the sound check, and puts this cap on me that had a super long bill on it. And he said, congratulations. You're in the band. I'm going, unbelievable. And then all of a sudden I'm hearing them going, Robert. He looks over, and then he goes over and talks to them. And he walks back and takes the cap off. And he says, hey man, it's looking really good. He goes, we just have to figure out how to do this. Okay. We got to figure out how to do this. So
how did that feel?
I'll call you again. I thought I'm in on some level.
Okay.
But
you still felt more positive than not. More
yes.
good than
yeah.
not.
No, because he put the cap on my head.
Yeah.
Then he just said, we got to figure this out. So the next day, I'm thinking.
But no fear? You had no fear? Maybe you had enough pot in you that you didn't have fear.
Well, I wouldn't say
like no fear that it might not happen. Like, what if this doesn't? What if they don't figure it out? You had enough confidence.
I knew I was in on some level.
Yeah.
So by the time the next day rolled around, and I got a phone call from Robert, and he said, Jason, Robert Lamm, give me a call. I have some good news. I'm going, holy shit. And I'm thinking, to tell you the truth, Vicki, I'm thinking they hired Micky Thomas. Fantastic. And I'm the bass player. Let me sing a song. Let me sing my one song I had that I co-wrote on Chicago 18. Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now. I wrote with Buzzy Feet. And that would have been very comfortable for me at that point in my life. So I called him back, left him a message. He wasn't there. He calls me back, misses me, leaves another message. Howard Kaufman calls me and says, hi, Jason, Howard. And I said, hi, Howard. He goes, so did Robert get a hold of you? And I said, well, he's left me some message. We've missed each other, but he says he has good news. And there's this pause, Vicki, again. So Kathleen listening to the songs, the first one, and then this one is like, your life's changing, man. There's this big pause. I said, yeah, he called me and says he's got good news. And this pause, and Howard Kaufman says, yep, so who do we talk to make a deal? When I went, oh my God, I'm in. So then I'll not belabor this point too much. We started writing songs together. It was fantastic. Lamm, Champlin, Panko a little bit. Lee, I got together with once to try and write something, but Lamm and I were writing songs. So I'm writing songs with Robert Lamm, right?
Wow. One
of the genius writers and he's into it. He fought for me, and I'll get to this in a second too, but and Champlin just embraced me, right? and we were at the microphone doing the background vocal thing. And it was just, suddenly I'm part of this sound. He's on the, he's on so many records. George Benson, Turn Your Love Around, The Tubes, She's a Beauty, Champlin. And then all of a sudden I'm hearing my voice. And I've heard these, again, I've heard this stuff so much, it's in my DNA that I can phrase with that.
Right.
I've got the ear to go to that, right? Rather than, hey, you got to come to me, man. So we're writing these songs. We're going to turn them into David Foster. And I'd met David. He loved my father. And I'd met him through a couple of good friends of mine, Tom and John Keane. He didn't know me as a singer, of course. And all of a sudden, obviously David had gone along with it to say that, he'd heard the tape, and he didn't fight them. But we were going to turn this demo tape in that we did at Danny's studio. And I remember at the very last second, I was telling Lamm, I said, I should go in and re-record a couple of these things because I had a pretty bad cold and it's not really great vocally. And he said something and I almost made a fatal mistake.
What?
And he said, I don't worry about the vocals. It's just to show him the songs. Well, this is the first thing David Foster is going to hear of Peter Cetera's replacement.
Absolutely.
And it's not up to par. So they give the tape. And as the story goes, Bobby Caldwell, my best friend, who had a song called Niagara Falls that was unbelievable on the 18th album. It's the first song on the album. David hires him to come into the studio to do some background vocals. He wanted to get him on mic and heard his voice, and he cornered him and said, you got to bail me out. They made a mistake. They got the wrong guy, man. You have to come in. And Caldwell says,
oh my God.
David, he goes, David says, well, I'm not saying fire him. I'm just saying you got to come and sing the singles, which, by the way, Vicki, I would have been fine with. I'm not arguing with him. I'm going, I'd be panicking too. And Bobby goes, man, this is real uncomfortable for me, David. He's my best friend.
Wow.
And David says, you just got to bail me out. Foster called Robert Lamm and said, you made a mistake.
Does Bobby tell you? Bobby doesn't tell you.
Yeah. How else would I have found out? Yes.
Right away, he tells you right then while this is going on?
Wait, how did I find out?
He didn't tell you right then. He did?
How did I find it?
How did you find out?
No. He didn't tell me right away. What it was,
yeah, he wouldn't tell you right
Lamm
away.
Foster went to Lamm and said, he went to Lamm and said, you made a mistake, man. You don't have the guy. And probably said, I want Caldwell to come in. And Lamm said to him, sorry, you're working with him. He's our guy.
Wow.
I'd take a bullet for Lamm and that band till the day I die.
Wow.
Now, if I didn't pull it off, Vicki, I got my shot.
No, yes, you earned your seat. Wow.
I
Good
mean,
for him.
how many people would have done that? This is Chicago 18, and he's like going, he believed in me that much. They all did, right? So,
wow,
man, so I walked in on day. I'm telling you, I think Caldwell told me pretty quickly.
Yeah. You knew when you first went into the studio with David Foster, you knew.
Yes.
You knew.
I knew that he was not happy. He liked me personally, but and I'd heard, this is so great. And again, these are lessons I love to pass on to up and comers. That I had heard what an ogre this guy is with singers, real ones, Barbra Streisand, right? Real singers.
You're a real singer, by the way, just for the record.
Well, I didn't know at the time. Thank you. And he helped me discover that, as what I'm about to tell you. And I'm sitting there going, and again, this helped me not relax, but not freak out, because I'm going, I'm going to crash and burn. This is going to be the moment. I was just happy I had a contract that said I was going to get paid for the year, whether I was able to perform or not. I go,
pay or play. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was as low as I was thinking. I was not thinking big at all. I'm going, this is incredible. I'm probably going to crash and burn. The guy knows that I'm not right. So he's going to chew me up and spit me out, but I'm going to get paid for the year. It's incredible. Right. So I walk in and he's very nice, of course.
Mhm.
And it was the coolest thing. He had this songwriting workshop or something from Canada down in his studio. And they all walk in, they're all young people. And Foster, with this voice, says, guys, this is the new lead singer of Chicago. And they're like, mesmerized. And I'm totally confused, going, he doesn't believe that. And that's probably maybe not going to be the case by the end of the day. But I'm like, how am I supposed to stand or react to this? But I just graciously said hi, thinking it doesn't really sound right, because I don't think this is going to happen. And he said to them, he goes, all right, you guys, we got to get some work done. So you got to get out of the studio, because most of the singers that he works with, or anybody, does not want people around.
Right.
And so they file out, and he left the door open, or somebody left the door open to the studio. So they're out in the lounge. It was, right outside the door. David looks at me. Luckily, we did my one song on the album, Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now. And so I knew it. And Vicki, I had sung it 6 months before. This is one of the songs I got my publishing deal with, before Heart of Mine. And it was the first time I was in the studio where I felt a real mastery of recording. I felt the technique all coming together, and it was really well crafted. So I said, just if you can duplicate that, Jason, because that's what they bought you on, they signed you on. So, but that's the moment where you may crash and burn, emotionally, and not be able to breathe and whatever. And I was kind of thinking that was what was going to happen. So Foster's looking at me, and he says, with a real feeble tone, and I thanked him for this. He got nervous when I first told him. I said, this is the best thing you could have done for me, man. He presses the talk back and he goes, you want to try one? I'm going, yeah, sure, right. And Vicki, I'm telling you, Humberto Gatica, with just won Grammy for record of the year, best recorded engineered album of the year, Chicago 17. That's the engineer on the other side of the glass, with David Foster, a modern day Mozart, starting vocals on Chicago 18, the follow-up to 17, their biggest selling album to date, with this new guy. And the tape started rolling, and I heard the most beautiful sound. It sounded like a finished record. And Humberto had the vocal sound and the setting so beautiful, inspiring, that I literally went, okay, here we go. And I took a deep breath. She was lost, uncertain, only she could see. And I said, I'm getting chills even talking about this. I knew I was up and running. And I'm telling you, when you hear that record, a lot of that is the first take, because I can hear my confidence growing throughout that song. That's when it happened. One by one, everybody from that songwriting camp was coming back into the studio. And at the end of the song, all of them, their mouths were wide open. And Foster,
I want to hear one thing. What did David Foster say?
His head was in his hands. And we finished the song, and he just goes, you just blew my mind. But then you knew you would. And we were up and running and motored through the record, had zero issues with him. And I was prepared, because that's my wheelhouse, the recording studio. That's why it worked. That's why when Bill Champlin and I went to the mic, when he started getting me on background vocal sessions, because that's where I was comfortable. I was and still am fast in the studio. And a sound, when it multiplies, when you double and triple the sound of the vocal, and that was Foster and Cetera's secret, just the harmonics in the voice. So that was the day. And I'm telling you, if you heard my recordings 2 or 3 months before Chicago 18, or saw me in a nightclub, whole different singer.
Wow.
something completely was born and changed on that day, never to return. So it was like,
And so that prophecy that was made, that something was happening and something was coming.
yep.
Yeah, you walked right into that.
And then, and sorry to just make this one long run-on sentence, but you'll appreciate this. So I'm getting through that section. I'm still getting high. I put the cocaine down because I'm going, you're going to really blow this, pun intended, if you do that.
What
Smoking
year is this?
86.
Okay.
86. And so the minute I
Mhm.
was done, with the vocals on Chicago 18, started going back to partying. Because I thought my problem with cocaine was that I just didn't have a dime. And so the minute I started doing it, was so guilty that I was robbing Peter to pay Paul, wasn't paying rent. But now I was making a couple bucks. So I'm dabbling back into it. And since I, was able to kind of, and I never really did, like loop 2-3 days together, but
Yeah.
I didn't have that stress that I didn't have my rent paid. So I thought I was being able to handle it. Went on the road, few months later, and all of a sudden, 2 weeks into my first tour, and I'd sworn it off. I was in some barbecue joint in Memphis, Tennessee. And as I was leaving, and it was not a party hang, 2 guys were there that were sober already. So we weren't even getting loaded. But man, they know how to find you. I was walking out. I was one of the last guys out the door, and some seedy looking character says to me, "Hey man, you know anybody who wants to buy some schniz?" I'm going, "Schniz?" And I go, "Well, I'm kind of getting low on my weed." I go, "Weed?" He goes, "No, man, toot, snow," or some antiquated term, right? And the thought crossed my mind, you're successful now. You got your bills paid. That was always the problem. You can handle this. Get some, and then you'll just do a little bit with a couple of guys that still just kind of dabble a little bit. And as they say, as us addicts can really relate to, the minute I decided, I was already high. It was on and off to the races. So I told him where I was staying, the Peabody Hotel. And so I got back to the Peabody, and we had 2 days off. And there was one crew member that always FedExed real strong stuff in. So I'm in the lobby, and I went up to him and said, "You got anything?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Give me one." And I palmed him $100, gave me a gram of cocaine. I went upstairs. The guy who I met in the restaurant came over with his girlfriend, gave me a little tester, which was just marginally better than what he sold me, which was really not good. And so I said, "Okay, I'll take one." And then he wanted to hang out with his girlfriend. I said, "No, you got to split, man." So he split. And I said, "No, I'm just going to get my motor running, and just do a little bit of the good stuff."
Mhm.
And that's all it took. And I was right there back in the bathroom by myself all night, just gone.
Yeah, that's what it
And
was.
in the morning, and I realized none of the success or any of this stuff is fixing this, man. I called Champlin, who was a year sober at the time, and my friend, and I said, we were supposed to go to a guitar shop, and I called him to just tell him. First, I said, "I can't go because I'm not feeling well." He goes, "Okay." Then I called him later, so I needed to talk to somebody. I said, "The reason I didn't go is because I've been up all night." And he goes, "I'll be right down." I'm going, "I'm not asking you to come over here." But that's what we do, right? He shows
Yeah.
up and he sees all the little miniature Tanqueray bottles and all the mini bar that
Yeah.
cleaned out. And he kind of laughs and goes, "I remember this look." And he goes, so we sat down, and and I said, "I know I got a problem, man, but I'm not going to stop smoking weed." I said, "Cocaine's my problem. Sure, I know that if I drink, I drink too much, and then I want to come back the other way. So I'll throw alcohol in there, but I'm not stopping smoking weed." And he goes, "Yeah, I used to say the same thing, but for me, it all led down to the same path. And so I'm like hearing a guy trying to close me, and I just said, well, that's nice and everything, but I'm not going to stop smoking weed. And then he asked me
God, you're telling my story, Jason.
Right. Absolutely. We all have the same story. He asks me two of the best questions anybody could have asked. He said, let me tell you something, man. Your career is like a pregnant woman. Something's about to happen, because Will You Still Love Me had just been released. And it was first couple of weeks it was released. So yeah, had a good first week, good second week, but it's just released. He goes, so something's about to happen, man. He goes, what are you going to do if this song's a hit? I'm thinking, I'm going to celebrate, man, because I'm the man. Right?
I'm going to smoke some.
Yeah, I'm going to celebrate. And who knows, little cocaine, whatever, but in general, I'm going to celebrate. And then he asked the best question. He goes, what are you going to do if it stiffs? Because I'm really still expecting that to happen. The shoe's going to drop, Vicki. So I'm an addict. You understand this. It's impending doom. There's no way this is going to work out good in that state, right? They're going to find out you really shouldn't be here. You've gotten this far, but this is the moment that they're all going to find out that you're a fraud, man. So when he asked me that question, I go, what are you going to do if this stiffs? And I go, that's probably what's going to happen. I am going to hurt myself badly, sabotage, because then everyone's going to know, and you will be the most embarrassed person. So I realized that's the part in our program that says, taking a trip, not taking a trip. I realized there was no other option, to get high or to get high. That is the question. I realized I was trapped, and I said, okay, what do I do? And he goes, I'll set you up with my counselor. It was up at Hazelden, but they've just started a new one down in West Palm Beach. I said, oh, Florida, cocaine, great. That'll probably be little did I realize that was the drug of real choice at the time that was bringing people into rehabs. So I did it. And I got in the shower. When I didn't realize I had surrendered yet, but in the shower, I was playing, and this is how cool all this stuff keeps coming around. And you saw him the other night. I put on Toto's Fahrenheit album, a song called Leah that Steve Ferrone wrote. That's one of the most beautiful pieces of music. And I felt so connected to it because Joseph Williams was singing it, who I actually called Jeff Porcaro to recommend for the gig. So I felt connected that I was the guy that made the recommendation. And so I'm hearing Joe's voice, Steve's beautiful music, and this shower was hitting me. And I'm not a super religious guy. This is like the second time that I actually remember, I guess you'd call it prayer, that I could recall. Because I remember standing there saying, I don't know if I said, if there's anybody out there, or God, if you're there, help me. And this water felt like a baptism. And the obsession was lifted.
Wow.
Forever.
Oh, so on that was it? You were done?
That was it. I had a bag of weed. Champlin said, because I had about 3 weeks before I was going to finish the tour and go into rehab. And he said, don't try and quit now, man. They don't like that. They like when you come in really hammered and pickled, so your defenses are down. And I said, okay. But I'm telling you, I was never drawn to that again. Because I knew where it was going, and something out there helped me. Right. And it's funny because I didn't keep going without it. Go, okay, I guess I get that praying thing out of the way until I got really more involved in programming this and that. But that was that. I went into rehab, and they told me, don't tell anybody. The funny thing was they put me in detox the first night because it's standard. And I said, I've been clean for 3 weeks. They said, doesn't matter. Legally,
really?
we have to put you in detox. I'm sitting in detox with this one other girl who needed to be there. And I'm watching TV, and all of a sudden Thick of the Night comes on. And there's Bill Champlin guesting with the jacket
Wow.
that I saw him wearing 3 days before. It was the most surreal thing. I'm
Wow.
going, that's my life. I'm part of that, but I'm in here kind of bottoming out, right? It's like this real beautiful yin and yang thing where when you're becoming successful, something's keeping you from really losing your mind, right? This whole bottom with drugs and alcohol. So I'm sitting in there and my counselor says, do not tell anybody what you do. They're going to treat you different. You need to be right size. And I said, I totally get that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting in my room with my roommate, and all of a sudden, I couldn't believe it. Will You Still Love Me comes on the radio. First time I hear it, because it's becoming a hit. It's becoming a hit. Now it's becoming a hit. And I'm flipping out. And I say to my roommate, I got to tell you something, but you can't tell anybody. He
Of
goes,
course he's not going to tell anybody.
no, but he goes, I don't want to know. And I go, dude, seriously, I'm freaking out right now and I have to share this. I got to tell you, but you can't tell a soul. He goes, don't tell me. We don't keep secrets in here. He goes, I'll tell if you tell me. I said, you can't.
I'll tell if you tell me.
I said, bro, I
Rufus.
got to tell somebody.
Wait, hang on, Jason.
He thought I was going to say, I got a pound of blow in my suitcase, right? But I tell him, that's me on the radio. And he's like, get the F out of here, because everybody's lying through their teeth in rehab, trying to make themselves feel bad. That's me on the radio. Yeah, I did this, right? And so I started singing along with it. And he's going,
Rufus is having a nervous breakdown. Rufus, come over here. Come over here. Somebody's at my front door. That is a crazy story. You started singing?
Just a line to show him. And he goes, that is you. Of course, it got out, which was another great opportunity for me because I diffused it, as I always have throughout my life. Is that somebody's kind of flipped out and nervous, I love diffusing it, because I learned that from Champlin, from the guys in Chicago, just really down to earth and not star time, so, but that's the arc of what happened with that. And that song went to number three pop, one of the biggest Chicago hits. I was in, and that was it.
Wow, that is so crazy.
30 plus years later, and I wrote What Kind of Man Would I Be, that you heard the other night with the symphony. That went to number 5. So I was in, felt comfortable.
Okay, so now tell me what it was like when you first hit the stage, and what it was like being part of the band at the beginning. Well, you kind of have touched on you in the studio, but being a part of the band on the stage, the audience, and how was the audience with you?
The audience, as I've seen, and Robert Lamm has stated this so perfectly, Chicago is an experiment. It's a logo that we have all created a body of work. And I don't feel bad about saying this, but because I've lived this and I've seen well before I was there and during my years, that it is multi-generational and it keeps going, that in 200, 300 years, this music and songbook will be revered, played, studied, like any of the works of the greatest classical composers in the world, because we will be classical at that point. And my first experience with that, to see that, was the first day I walked on stage. Peter Cetera is iconic. He's the gold standard. He is the tenor voice of that band leading up to that moment. And to be honest, for a good while, I was always feeling, well, you just like Nathan East, you're really like the replacement guy, like the afterthought. There's no way you can be that. But guess what? When you start contributing and you make some of the biggest hits with the band, you have your era. Absolutely. And guys like Rascal Flatts that say, you're the guy.
Right.
When we got into this band, you're the singer, dude.
Right.
We love Cetera, but we came up on you, you know?
Right.
So it's like, it's amazing. I just, one day you just realize, accept it. This is your life, right? So the first day I walked on stage in Rockford, Illinois, Rick Nielsen of Cheap Trick, who are from Rockford, Rick was standing on the side of the stage. So it was like surreal. I'm standing there and there's Rick.
Yeah.
We go on stage and there's all these people with signs out there saying, "Welcome, Jason."
Oh.
They wanted their band to, like they still do. It doesn't matter.
Oh.
Doesn't matter who's up there. This is the soundtrack to their life. And I get it. Elton John's on his farewell tour, right? I believe he'll still be playing Vegas and whatever, you know.
Of course.
But he's on his farewell tour. That's a huge part of my life. The day Elton John is not available to go and hear,
Mhm.
or hate to say the day that he's not here anymore, if he
God
goes
forbid,
before
yeah.
me, if he goes before me, there's a part of me that's gone. You know what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
that's what the music is. That's what the music is. It's a part of, so they're hanging on for dear life. And so I love that because we're a part of it. We created it. And I didn't think it was going to work, you know? So the first night, like I said, I always felt comfortable as a bass player. I knew from note one when we went out there, we were killing it. It was a phenomenal band, still is. It's just always going to maintain a standard of excellence. But man, Danny, me, Bill, Dwayne Bailey, sorry for all that binging. People are, I don't know if you're hearing that, but they're sending texts. It's like, stop texting me. I'm talking to Vicki. But it was,
Yeah, by the way, you're gonna have to go back and read the comments after the show because a lot of your friends are
okay, great.
chatting it up. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, as a bass player,
Mhm.
bang, man, that was like, you know, and so we hit the ground running. And these guys gave me that opportunity to grow as a vocalist, you know, and I listened to, you know, once in a while I hear the early live stuff, and I could see when I was tentative and was really not comfortable going all out. But plus it was a lot. The thing I learned too, Vicki, was that I was singing probably 70% of the at least 60 to 70% of the night.
Oh, hell yeah.
And we were doing a 2-part show. So I had to pace myself. And by the way, that's technique. That's Seth Riggs. I forgot to tell you that part, that my mom bought me a vocal lesson. My 21st birthday. She tricked me because it was expensive. So I couldn't blow it off. And I went into you know, thinking I was going to do my one and only vocal lesson with Seth Riggs. Again, spotted me and said, "You got to keep coming here, man." So a good year and a half of vocal training with Seth Riggs prepared me for when this opportunity happened, that I could go out there and have the stamina and do the 2-part shows. But I was pacing myself to not like blow my voice out on 25 or 6 to 4. At the very beginning, I was definitely, you know, kind of tiptoeing around some of that high stuff, but developed later into just powering out full voice. And as you heard, I still, you know, thanks to Seth, you know, still got that range, but that was
Yes, you do.
that was just technique by going and getting the reps and getting prepared. So it was, everybody was saying, "We want you here," the fans, everything. So
Okay, so because we have to talk about the White Album, and we have to talk about what you're doing. So 30 years. 30 years.
Yep.
That is a long ass time. So what was your life like? And because Chicago, okay, so my friend Lauren Gold is in Chicago now. What Ray, they're always playing. What's your life like for that 30 years?
Somebody asked me the other day, like, they were like, you know, how are you able to do it?
Yeah.
You know? And it's easy because it's all I ever knew. Again, it was like being 23 and really 24 to get on the road and never stop and we used to talk about it, that we used to talk about how not many people could really pull that off, but it was, I really believe, again, it's part of the training that allows me to continue to do this, because all those reps, and learning how to really pace yourself. Once I had a family, and was starting to miss, parts of my life and everything, it's that part starts entering into it, but the actual stamina of going out there and doing it. Plus I was sober. I got sober 2 weeks into that, really helped.
Wow. Yeah, of course.
And just taking care of yourself,
And then how about your family, Jason? How long you and Tracy married?
coming up on 30 years.
Oh, okay. So how did you manage that? How did you manage to fall in love and get married and start a family and do all that while you're on the road all the time?
Well, she was really, if not the first, like probably the second girl that I really pursued without having an indication that she was interested in me. I don't know where that came from, because that's not me, I got my heart broken in high school once, that just made me gun shy to ever put myself out there unless they were really showing that they were interested, but she didn't. And I know she wasn't playing games, but I reached out to her and pursued her, and she told me that was a turn on, because she knew she wasn't giving an indication, but it was just right, and she's very independent and had 2 kids of her own that I raised with her. They were 4 and 6. And so it was, again, she's the perfect wife for a life like this. And in 2015, so this is how I ended up coming home, is in 2015, her mother had breast cancer and thought she'd beaten it and came back. And so her father was, had certain health issues, but, watching his wife declining over a period of 5-6 years, in 2015, when it had come back and they had her on all the medications and everything, her father unexpectedly passed first, and that was the end of 2015. And I saw my wife. That was the moment that I saw somebody that was really vulnerable. And her mother still battling her cancer. Once they told her that the treatment is not working, so now we're going to put you officially into hospice state, which I learned what that meant. Didn't mean she was going to be gone in a week, because a lot of times they're in hospice and they're gone 2 or 3 days. No, it meant they're not going to treat the illness anymore because it's futile. It's not going to go. That's when I called management and said, I got to go home and take care of my family, because her mom obviously is going to be gone, and my wife is not going, I'm not going to leave her to fend for herself. So in 2016, we finished, we did the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We had a really great tour with Earth, Wind and Fire, finishing at Madison Square Garden, sold out in April. And that's when I came home to take care of my people. And it's, her mom passed a couple months later. And it's that time of your life where, we're getting older and we're losing a lot, little did I know too, and a lot of people know this, but, through our disease, Vicki, we lost one of the kids, man, Clarky. He was 30. And so our mom went first. And then Clarky, it's been almost 4 years. So that's why I had to come home. You don't even realize it, but something's telling you you're either, because I've seen, and and it was really sweet when I told the guys and they totally understood. Lamm, when I told him what was going on at home, and I heard basically what I heard as a groan of understanding. I've watched not only that band, but other bands that just stay out there. And I understand it. There's a responsibility, and especially for guys like Lamm, Pankow, Lockney, and that's their songbook, that from the beginning.
Right.
And they don't have those issues of parents that are maybe ailing, but for me, it was that moment, and I'll never be able to thank them enough for understanding and bringing me into the family at first, and then just get
So
to live.
they totally understood that you had
Yep.
to go and
Oh,
you
yeah.
left on good terms and all
Yeah,
of that was,
absolutely. Yep.
and no regrets, I assume.
Not at all. I mean,
Mhm.
I can only imagine being 6,000 miles away rather than 6 feet away when my wife got the call that Clark was gone. I was so grateful that I was standing right there.
Yeah.
So it all makes sense. Um, and Lauren's a great friend of mine too. I love Lauren Gold.
Oh my God. We were just in touch today.
Yeah.
He's a doll face. So by the way, you were talking about Elton so much when Snuffy and I were in London, we were staying at the Langham and Elton's band was there. And so we ate breakfast with Kim every
Mm.
morning we were this close trying to decide whether to go to the show. We really wanted to go to the show but there was also, I don't know. Anyway, we didn't go and I'm beating myself up that we didn't go. We tried to work it out on a night. Anyway, so, okay. Did you see the farewell tour? Did you go to,
I didn't. Nigel's a very good friend of mine. He's playing drums on one of the tracks I'm working up for my new solo project.
nice.
And singing background vocals with me. It's pretty insane. It sounds like Elton John background vocals because I have Nigel and me.
Yeah.
And but I've seen them several times over the years. He's always taken care of me, but I didn't want to reach out
Everybody in the world was.
well, actually, the appropriate thing would you buy your tickets, and just go. So yeah. But you know what? Yeah, there was a part of me that just kind of felt like I've seen it enough times, and that might even be sad to go as a fair, because I'm seeing Davy Johnstone putting Instagram posts up, and it's pretty bizarre. Actually, I'm going to blog about this and post pretty soon because this means a lot to me. It's what I was just talking about, that when that thing is over, there's a part of you that's over.
Yeah.
I've got Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. I bought not a reissue, but an old vinyl LP that's sitting in my other room that I do most of my work in, sitting there just tactile to open it up. And, and I bought this like 3 months ago. I got an 8-track cassette tape of
8-track cassette tape.
Honky Chateau, because that's where I discovered Elton. My mom had an 8-track player, so I bought one. I have that 8-track sitting there. I've got the single of Rocket Man, which is the first record that I ever bought, which meant my grandmother gave me the money. And now he's on a farewell tour, which I know he's going to be.
Of course.
The guy's not done playing. He's just
No.
not touring, and I don't blame him. Park yourself in Vegas and stay there.
Of course he will.
Yeah.
Of course he will.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you're done with the drugs. You're not doing Chicago. Is there like a road hang up? Is it great to be, well, you're going through all this trauma. Well, wait, I have a question before we get into life after the road. Is it hard on your marriage? I mean, I can only imagine. I know Tracy's very independent. She's what a great woman. I only met her for 10 minutes and I love her.
Yeah.
She's wild and wonderful. But is it hard on a relationship? I can only imagine that it is challenging. Or did you guys just have it down?
We were just lucky and then had it. She's so independent. Always was, always has been in her relationships. So she's the perfect person for me to, not have super neediness. And same thing with me. I just came back from, I had a Generation Radio show last night, July 4th in Charlotte, North Carolina. And it's funny because I think I was talking to my friend Ira Dean, who was in Trick Pony, the bass player. And I said, it's so funny, man. I literally was thinking, I've been on the road so much. And this is the battle cry. If you're lucky enough to have been in something that long, you inevitably are going to go through a phase. And I've heard every single person that has been involved in something like that say, I got to get out of here. I got to get off the road. I got to get off the road. Right. And then you usually just get through it, because I've heard, everybody talk about it, but it's, if it's your life, it's your life.
Right.
Don't do it. So me taking this break, to be able to take care of my family and all this stuff really was, was that I knew I had to do it, and really enjoyed no responsibilities, not having to be anywhere, just taking time off.
Did
But
you
now
take time? Did you take time off
I
before moving in?
literally for a year didn't touch my instrument,
No kidding.
didn't sing a note. It was wonderful.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was fantastic. It was just a new life, you know,
Mm.
but mixed with a
Okay,
lot
so
of,
now coming back together, was it weird for you and Tracy to now be together all the time
well,
after having all this independence,
no, because number one, we really like each other.
which is a good
Yeah,
thing?
we like each other as well as love each other, like crazy. But we like each other. Coupled with, we were about ready to go through some really traumatic stuff.
Yeah,
And
and
on
you
a,
needed each other.
you
Yeah.
know, I love that I'm part of a fellowship
Mhm.
that talks about real stuff, because in those unimaginable
Mhm.
circumstances, I don't even really like to call them gifts or blessings, but the amazing, profound lessons that come out of that stuff
Mhm.
that you're just not going to get anywhere else. So Tracy and I, at that point in our lives, having to come together and be together a lot was a real good thing.
Mhm.
Again, like I said, to be that close to her when the shit was hitting the fan,
Mhm.
with all of it, her mother, our son, the whole thing. Thank you, whatever is out there, up there, for putting me in the right place where I needed to be, And in that regard, it's so funny. Some people may just look at the whole, you know, flashing lights part of all this, of like being in entertainment and,
Mhm.
being a part of some pretty major music history and everything. But when I look at whatever's been looking out for me my entire life and putting me in the right places, that's part of it. That when you really need to be present, you
Mhm.
are, so it's
I love that, Jason. So, okay, so we've been talking for a long, but we're going to talk a little bit longer because I have to ask you. Oh my God. Okay, so I sent you the picture. Joey Molland, Badfinger played. I was a rock and roll promoter of this club this size on Bleecker Street in the 80s, and they played. 80 people fit in the club, maybe 100, and it was 1988, and I was so high that they literally held me up. But you and Joey and Mickey, who played my living room, and Todd Rundgren, oh my God. Now, what is this? Why get together and do the Beatles White Album? How did this come to be? Who started it? Who instigated? And how did you pick who was gonna?
Jay DeMarcus of Rascal Flatts has been a friend of mine since 2002, I think.
Mhm.
And we have a band now called Generation Radio, as you know.
Right.
He always said, when things settle down for both of our bands,
Mhm.
let's do something together. So we did. We put it together. Have one record out. Going to start the next one. Ferrone's going to do the next one with us. Jay was beating the bushes in Nashville to see if there were any agents that were interested in looking at me to just book on solo things.
Mhm.
And this one agent gave him a number and said, have Jason call Toby Ludwig. I think that these guys might hit it off. So I talked to Toby, and Toby's a manager and a concert producer.
Mhm.
He manages Christopher Cross. You forgot to mention Christopher.
I forgot to mention Christopher Cross, this
Right.
little guy, Christopher Cross.
So he manages Christopher, the OJs, Commodores, minus Lionel, of course, Maxi Priest. And so he said, hey, I've got a tour. We're looking for a bass player, singing bass player with a pedigree for an all-star lineup. Are you interested in, Jay was asking him, who is it? And he goes, I can't tell you. He goes, come on, man. You can trust us. So anyway, he said it's Todd Rundgren, Christopher Cross, Micky Dolenz, and Joey Molland. And I said, absolutely, I'm interested in that. So I went out and we had a blast, and I didn't know what to make of, all these personalities, because these are icons, right? And I'd always heard about Todd. I was not a freak Todd Rundgren fan. I appreciated what he did, but I was not a freak like I know a lot of my friends.
There are some I know people that like travel the world with like crazy ass stuff.
Yeah, so those are fans, but I'm talking about.
You're talking about musicians that
I'm talking about legitimate record producers, brilliant record producer musicians and artists that are like Todd Rundgren's the be all end all. I don't quite get it, but since you get it, I'm intrigued. So I'm thinking, I'm going to learn something from being around this guy. And I don't even know that it's specifically about music. And I met him, and he's not like a warm and fuzzy guy, and I'd always heard how sarcastic he is, which I am too. So I thought this could be cool. And my buddy John Field said, with Todd, if you bring the music, he's going to love you. So you'll be fine. And so I go, cool, man. So we go out there, and he's not like, hey man, how you doing? It's like, it's nice to meet you, And we start making music, and it clicks. And again, it's not like, this exuberant personality, but I know he likes me. Right. And so we start really hitting it off and really doing well with the music. And the first thing that I saw with him that I really big lesson is this tour. We didn't have a ton of time to prepare for it, which I like weird stuff.
How much time is not a ton of time?
Couple of days of rehearsal, maybe 3.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Maybe 3 days of rehearsal.
Okay.
And it's a White Album. It's not
the
like
White Album.
it's nonsensical stuff, not like really symmetrical. And
I know you're friends with Will Lee, right?
Yes, indeed.
And so Will's story about the White Album, Will has great stories about, because he was on his honeymoon and he was learning in the garage the nonsensical stuff during anyway. Yeah.
Oh, it's bizarre. So we show up there, and Micky at first was like, I didn't know where he was at, man. He was like, he didn't seem like super connected to everything, only to come to find, because his beautiful wife Donna, as we all started getting to know each other and everything, he was nervous. And I'm like thinking, why is he nervous? But she's like, he's like nervous because he's around like what he considers like super heavyweight musicians. And I'm going, yeah, but we're not going to act weird or anything. And the minute he saw that we were cool, again, that's like that whole diffusing thing. The minute this pack of people got together, we were riding down the road on a bus one night early. And it was so beautiful, Vicki, because all of a sudden I'm realizing, because I'm going, what's Todd Rundgren going to be like? Is he going to be sitting in the back? I have the back lounge and you got, like whatever, pecking order. Never anything like that.
Wow.
We're on the bus and it's like 3 a.m. All of us are up in the front lounge. Wow. Every one of us laughing, talking, telling stories. And it's like everybody's hanging.
So Todd became one of the guys. So Todd was one of the guys.
It's not that he became one. He was from day one. He was never.
So cool.
He wants.
Well, I thought when you very first met him, he was a little, no?
Well, he's just not a warm and fuzzy guy.
Okay. That's
him. I mean, it's like, he's not going to come running up and, hey man, really great to meet you. And no, he's like very matter of fact and super bright, as he's a genius pretty much, intellect. And he's in the thing. So the lesson says he's all about the music, which is how I am.
Right.
Rest of it is like jive, man. It's like, listen, we'll do what we got to do, but at the end of the day, you better deliver, man. You know, that's what it's all about. And if you deliver, we're all good. If you don't, we got a problem, right? So we're all in the front bus, and then all of a sudden at one point, Mickey, who I discovered how brilliant this guy's mind is. He's the funny one, right? He's like the funny monkey, but he's a smart dude.
Oh yeah.
Into astrophysics and all, right? Just deep, deep intellect. So all of a sudden, we're sitting there, and Mickey, just out of nowhere. So anybody who's watching this, who's a Monkees fan, just imagine this. You're on a bus with Todd Rundgren, Christopher Cross, Joey Molland, and Micky Dolenz just stands up and goes, "Okay, enough of the small talk. Why do we have to die?" And I went, "Oh, this is going to get good." And Todd launches into, "Well, it's because our DNA keeps fraying. If we could find a way so that our DNA didn't fray," and I'm going, "Oh, this is going to go down the rabbit hole." I love it. Those guys just started in, and it was beautiful. I had to go to sleep because it just kept getting so deep and esoteric, but that's what it was like. And it was just a thing.
Wow. That's just crazy.
And we did it again.
And then the music. I mean, then when you guys like made the music, what was that like?
Well, here's what was fun about it was that when you think about it, because nobody really planned this, but this is how it ended up. And it started off a little ragged because, you know, we were just trying to get it up and running. But once we got our footing, like a handful of shows in, it started rocking, man. And we started, word of mouth was getting out. We were starting to sell out. And because what it was, if you think about it, I was laughing saying that it's really like the evolution of man. Okay. You got Christopher Cross standing all the way to the right of the stage, and he's just standing and delivering. There's no performance really per se of Christopher Cross. He doesn't need to. That voice is.
How do you guys decide who's going to do what songs?
Todd, they asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, "Here's what I don't want to do. I don't want to pick songs that I know that Christopher Cross is going to want to do. So I'll tell you what, let's hear from him. Let's hear from Todd. And then let's just kind of talk about it." And as it turned out on the White Album, what was really cool was that I ended up with a lot of John Lennon stuff, which isn't what normally I would be the guy you would talk, but I loved it. Glass Onion, Julia.
Nice.
Really cool stuff, right? And so I was able to you know, flex some different muscles. Hey, are you trying to copy John Lennon? There it is, right? It's like, hey, I'm just performing the music. But what the whole vibe was, Vicki, was that you got Christopher Cross, who's just standing there and delivering. You get Joey Molland, who's got some moves. He's like the regal.
So like, what's Joey doing? Like, name a song that Joey did.
You
think?
He did Revolution. He did Savoy Truffle, things like that. I can't remember the other stuff. So here's the vibe across the stage. So then you get Joey, who's, you know, he's kind of this British royalty in his suit. Then you get me, who's right in the middle. I'm the muso, but I like to move, you know, so I like to entertain also. So I'm right in the middle. This is the evolution of man. Then you get Todd Rundgren, who is theater, right?
Right.
This is a performance artist. He's still very musical, but it's really about costume changes. Bungalow Bill was like hilarious with his squirt gun. It was like, you know, so he's like right there. And then you get Micky Dolenz, which is vaudeville.
He's just out.
It's the evolution of man. You get hardly any movement all the way to Mick. It was beautiful. Rocky Raccoon, he was amazing. So we've all fantasized about doing that tour again.
Wow, I would love to see it. Oh my God. All right, so Connection Radio, we're going to close with Connection Radio. So tell me about this.
Connection Radio? Oh, Generation Radio.
Generation Radio, I'm sorry.
Connection, you're going back to the drug days.
Generation Radio.
So as I said, Jay DeMarcus, well, first of all, he left me a letter in 2002 or 2003 at this gig in Washington State. the Washington State Fair, basically saying, Chicago is the reason I play music, and I've particularly followed your era of the career. That was the moment when I realized, okay, Jason, you are part of what has inspired a generation of artists that are really successful. Rascal Flatts is crediting you for being a big part of what makes them tick, as well as Cetera and the stuff. But you're the guy, because they're 10 years younger than me. So when they were really getting into the radio, I was the voice they were hearing.
Right.
So Jay reached out and said, hey, I just love to write with you. We're going to make our third record. They're to what now, 8 or 9? He said our third record. And so I heard their music and I said, whoa, so I called him and we just became fast friends and have been buddies ever since. And like I said, he said, when things calm down for us, let's put something together. And Deen Castronovo wasn't in Journey at the time. And so he said, what about Deen, man? We did a Crossroads with him and he's incredible. I said, I love it. Called Deen. Deen was like, I can't believe this, man. I love both you guys, man. So we all got together and it was just magic. This record we made the concept was that we were going to take Journey, Chicago, and Rascal Flatts. And that was our set list. Pretty insane.
Wow.
From the guys that were in the band, so it's almost, it's kind of a tribute, but our tagline is we're a tribute to ourselves. Right. So we put this together and we started playing live, and Neil Schon was watching us like a hawk, watching Deen. So they needed him to come and do Lollapalooza with them. And the minute that happened, I knew that he was going back in the band, as he should. That's his gig.
Yeah.
And, we had put all this energy into making this record, and Deen was really sorry, saying, man, I am so sorry. I said, no, that's where you need to be. And I told Jay, never fear. Steve Ferrone is here. I called Steve and I go, hey, man. He goes, absolutely. Let's do it. So, we're in no bad position drummer wise, so that's going on. It's wonderful. We're going to make our second record. We got a handful of dates throughout the rest of the year. So I'm doing that. Jay's running a record label successfully out in Nashville called Red Street Records. They're a Christian and a country label. I've got a record I'm working on that I've gone back to all of the guys that I came up listening to that have become my friends, icons. Michael O'Mardian is all over my record, who produced Christopher Cross's breakout record. Piano players played on tons of Steely Dan records. Ricky, don't lose that number. So Cetera's Next Time I Fall, Bobby Caldwell co-wrote. And Glory of Love, that's Michael O'Mardian. So O'Mardian's all over my new project. I'm trying to get it done by the end of the year. It might be the beginning of next year. I got Ferrone, John Robinson, Vinnie Colaiuta, all the old cats, man, like to make music the way I came up listening to it, not trying to be modern. Working on that and doing dates on my own, 3 symphony dates so far this year, and a handful of my own solo band, just did Epcot Center. So, I'm gone enough to where it's fun, but I need to be with my family again. There's no way I could be gone as much as I had in the past with what's happened, with all the loss in our life. So.
Well, Jason, I, for one, am glad you're here because I'm going to get to hear you more. So are you going to be gigging locally anywhere that we can come see you?
Not at the current moment, but
okay.
But we're looking at,
Well, I hope you make that happen because I want to be there because I so enjoyed seeing you last week.
Thank you. Love having you here. I'm glad you guys stayed till the end.
Oh, hell yeah. We weren't going anywhere. It was like, why is this over now? No, we want more.
That made me feel so good.
And I also, it's not just, oh, Rufus is going to make me crazy. It's not just the music and your ethics in that regard, but it's also the man that you are, the person that you are, the sweetheart that you are, the loyalty of the people who love you, your fans, Rufus. And you are so loved. I mean, everybody who came out to see you last week, it was so beautiful to behold all the love in that section of those people who were just your people. And it was so much more than just the music. It's Jason. It was Jason Love. It was Jason
Thank
Love.
you. Thank you.
And so I'm a fan, and thank you so much for doing this, and and for taking so much time and sharing so much of yourself with us. And we're gonna go to dinner. Let's do dinner.
Okay. And I tell you, I love having been Luis Conte's sub today.
Well, you were gonna do it in 2
I
weeks.
know.
You
No,
just
but I like
flipped.
being his sub. Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to dinner.
And thanks for jumping in for Louise. Yes.
My
thank you.
pleasure.
All right. Say hi to Tracy.
I sure will.
Take
See
care.
you
Jason.
guys